Hey everyone, it's Twitch65, and today we're going to build a static scenic photograph and display base for my model trains. I decided to build this static display so that I have a way to photograph and show off the model railroad cars and engines I have in my collection and ones that I'll acquire in the future. The base also gives me a way to brush up and practice techniques that I'll need for getting the layout from a basic pink foam to looking more like a miniature railroad. Again, I returned to my insulation foam scrap pile and cut roughly the shape I needed. To help the glue bond the pieces of foam together strongly, I scored both surfaces with a blade. Any added surface roughness will help the glue have a better surface adhesion. I come back in with a hot wire foam cutter to carve the hills back from a block shape of foam into a rough shape of a natural hill. Plaster cloth is the same material doctors use to make casts for broken bones. So it's as simple as cutting small patches of the cloth, dunking it in some water, and smoothing it on. Next comes to sculpt the mold. Sculpt the mold materials would fill in the gaps and allow me to get more of an organic shape, which I started by adding very thin layers to the vertical surfaces of the embankment. I then pressed the plaster cast into the sculpt the mold and down into the trench. Added to either side of the tracks, and then I just kept pressing and smoothing and working it to give the ground less of a tabletop flat look. To glue down or fix the track in place, I used just some basic household latex caulk. Just make sure you get the caulk that's paintable. Add some weights to keep the track in contact with the foam base while it dries. I left mine overnight to cure. Next evening, I started painting all that white plaster. I chose dark and light browns mixed with some tans. That's a good dirt color for anywhere in the northeastern part of the United States. Keeping the paint wet and diluted with plain old tap water will give you time to blend the colors and get the paint into all the little nooks and crannies. The plaster stonework was base coated with black ink and a little flow aid. I then came back with a light gray acrylic craft paint in successive lighter and lighter layers. For the final coat, I added some white to the gray paint and just hit the highest points of the stone face. Weathering the track started with a quick laying down of some paint with my airbrush. I used an olive drab acrylic paint. This works as a nice overall old creosote wooden tie and rusty rail color. Remember to come back and use a cotton rag over a flat block to remove the paint from the top of the rails. I then came back with a paintbrush and added some rusty red color, actually red hull from Vallejo, over the rail spikes and the lower part of the rails. Unsanded tile grout makes for a great looking dirt color. It's relatively inexpensive and comes in a wide range of colors. And it's readily available at your local big box hardware store of choice. I chose a color that's closer to a buff, and it's a lighter brown color, but even a darker brown would look good. I just spread some PVA glue everywhere I wanted the ground cover to go and sprinkled the grout over the top. Then came back with a quick spray of isopropyl alcohol to break the surface tension and a liberal amount of a 50-50 mix of PVA and water to glue it all in place. Following the same steps as above, but replacing the tile grout with your choice of colored flocking. I like to use Woodland Scenic's burnt grass for the undercover. I then layer up greener static grasses from 2 to 4 millimeters for end scale. And now for the finishing touches, ballasting the Cato Unitrack. I start with a fine black ballast and add some fine gray to it, about a 75-25 gray to black mix. I start with straight from the bottle PVA applied to the sides of the raised beds of the Unitrack, and then I spoon over a layer of the ballast. After letting the glue start to set 5 minutes or so, I come back with a soft half-inch flat brush to shape the sloping sides. This will give us a nice solid foundational coverage. The final step is to pinch some ballast from the spoon and add it to the top of the rails. You don't need a lot as you just want to cover the plastic road bed and still be able to see the ties. Add additional ballast where it's needed and push excess off the diorama base. A light tapping with the brush handle can also help settle the ballast in position. The goal is to make the roadbed look uneven and like it's supporting the track ties for the heavy freight loads that roll over the tracks for years to come. I also make sure to come in and remove any that's covering the ties at this point. So spend some time with a soft brush to push the ballast into its final position. Once you're happy with the look, come back with your isopropyl alcohol and then the watered down PVA glue. This time for the PVA and water glue mixture, I use a dropper so that I don't disturb any of the hard work I just did. Leave it 12 to 24 or longer to dry and cure. The finishing touch is to add some weathering powders to the track bed, and this will represent dust, dirt, grime, oil leaks, or even just regular old rust along the line. Anyway, here's the finished base with a blue sky backdrop, ready for future photo shoots. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, please consider a like and a subscribe.